Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a journey beyond Earth, really focusing on the astronauts themselves.
Yeah, these incredible individuals.
Exactly. We'll look at how they're selected, which is, incredibly tough,
Wait, for sure.
and then explore some surprising ways their work up there actually ripples back and improves our lives down here.
Right, the practical benefits
Yes.
and also the physical side of things.
Yes, the demands on their bodies, which feels really relevant, especially with NASA's oldest active astronaut just returning, gives us a real sort of tangible look at it.
It does. It's always captivating to think about what it takes.
Hmm.
The mix of smarts, resilience, sheer dedication.
So for this deep dive, we've gathered quite a range of sources.
We're looking at NASA's own info on like astronaut selection and the benefits of space exploration,
Okay.
plus articles on the physiological impacts, spaceflight effects, and some history too about a really key astronaut.
And even a little bit on the economic backdrop, right? Which seems separate, but it's all part of the world that, well, funds these missions.
Exactly. It all connects in some way.
So our mission here is basically to distill all this, boil it down, and give you a really clear picture of what it takes to become an astronaut, the maybe unexpected ways space tech helps us daily, and the real physical side of living and working in space.
Sounds good. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with that first hurdle, actually becoming an astronaut. How does that even begin?
Well, the first step, according to NASA's own FAQ for the astronaut candidate program, is you've got to build a resume.
Okay, standard enough.
But specifically using the USAJOBS resume builder. And what's maybe not surprising but still impressive is how many applicants already have like advanced STEM degrees.
Right, so the bar is incredibly high, even before you formally apply.
Totally. It shows the dedication needed way ahead of time. After the resume, there's a big online application, assessments, questionnaires, the whole deal.
And you have to submit all the required documents by the deadline meticulously.
Yeah, no room for error there.
It sounds like it tests your attention to detail just as much as your qualifications.
Pretty much. And for people in the active duty military, it's slightly different.
Oh, how
They
so?
have to apply through both USAJOBS and their own military service channels. It's like a dual track.
Interesting. Does that suggest NASA puts a particular emphasis on that military background? What unique things might they bring?
Well, that's a great point. It definitely highlights that NASA values the discipline, the operational experience you get in the military,
Makes sense.
and often specific technical skills, too. Think aviation, engineering under pressure. These folks are often trained for high-stress situations, which is, pretty relevant for spaceflight.
Absolutely. And NASA really stresses getting everything right the first time, doesn't it? You submit, and only your contact info can be updated later.
Exactly. Preparation is key. You can't go back and tweak your experience section.
Wow. Okay, so assuming someone actually makes it through this gauntlet, what about the job itself? Like pay, for instance?
Yeah, so the annual salary for astronauts based on the 2024 schedules is around $152,258.
Okay.
They expect some adjustments for 2025, but that's the ballpark. It's worth remembering. That's an approximation, of course.
And what about the military candidates?
Interestingly, they actually stay on active duty status for pay and benefits. So their compensation follows military lines. It shows there are different paths, different structures within the Corps.
Okay, that gives us a sense of the professional side. But to really understand these people, looking at the pioneers helps. Let's talk about John Glenn. His name is just synonymous with early American spaceflight.
Oh, absolutely. John Glenn's story is, well, it's pretty incredible. Early on, very active football, basketball, tennis in high school.
Huh, sporty.
Yeah. And then he studied chemistry in college, but also got a private pilot license through a civilian program. You sort of see the path forming early, that love for aviation.
And then being picked as one of the original Mercury 7 in '59. That must have been huge.
Monumental. The sources mention his strength of personality and his dedication. You could imagine those qualities were essential for something so new and, frankly, dangerous.
And the Friendship 7 flight itself, obviously a massive achievement for the U.S.
Absolutely. But what's really insightful about Glenn, I think, isn't just that one flight. It's his whole life arc.
How so?
Well, he served as a U.S. Senator for Ohio for, what, over 20 years? 1974 to 1999.
Right, a whole other career.
Exactly. And then he goes back to space at age 77. Became the oldest person to orbit the Earth.
That part always blows my mind, orbiting Earth at 77.
Right. It just makes you rethink limitations and highlights that long-term commitment you often see in astronauts. It wasn't just a job for him.
Definitely not. Now, looking back at that era, the sources mention his comments in 1962 about women in space, citing the social order. It's important to place that in historical context, right, as we see how things evolved. Yeah.
It is crucial. Yeah, understanding the context of the time is key. But it's
Yeah.
also really important to see how things changed, both in the program and maybe in his own views.
Oh.
By 1965, after he left NASA, he apparently said NASA should give a serious chance for space women as scientist astronauts.
So shift there.
Seems like it. And later reports say he supported female astronauts like Judith Resnick in the late 70s. So you see this evolution happening alongside societal changes.
That's a really important point. It shows progress. And initially, that requirement for test pilots, which were mostly men back then, effectively kept women out until 65, right?
Correct. It wasn't until 1978 that the first women were actually selected, and they came in as mission specialists.
Yeah.
A huge step forward for inclusivity.
Definitely. Okay, let's shift now to the physical side. The really intense realities of space travel. The recent return of Don Pettit, NASA's oldest active astronaut, kind of brings this right to the forefront.
Yeah, Don Pettit, 70 years old recently, just finished 220 days on the ISS. And reports noted he looked, quote, gaunt and frail when he got back, which, understandably sparked some concern.
Yeah, you see those images, and it's a stark reminder of what space does to the body.
It is, though NASA put out a statement saying he's doing well and in the range of what is expected after landing.
That's reassuring. It suggests they really understand these effects and how recovery works.
Oh, absolutely. What's fascinating is our general grasp now of the physiological challenges. You're in microgravity, near weightlessness,
Right.
and your body just doesn't get the normal signals from gravity to, like, maintain muscle mass or bone density.
So things start to atrophy.
Exactly. You get significant decreases in strength, in endurance. That's why they have those super rigorous exercise routines up there, trying to mimic Earth-based muscle work.
But it's not a perfect substitute.
Not entirely. So the bone loss, the muscle weakening, it definitely makes walking on Earth tough when they first get back.
Yeah.
But like NASA said, they have protocols, they have knowledge now to help astronauts recover pretty quickly, all things considered.
And while they're up there dealing with all this, they're not just, floating around. They're doing crucial research.
Precisely. The ISS is this unique, incredible lab. They're doing research on everything from, like, new water sanitization methods to how plants grow without normal gravity, even how fire behaves differently in space.
Wow.
And a lot of these experiments, they lead to surprising discoveries that actually help us back here on Earth. Real applications.
Okay, let's dig a bit deeper into those physical effects. There's an article, Recent Progress in Space Physiology and Aging, that had some interesting points. It mentioned that some effects of spaceflight and even just long-term bed rest on Earth can actually mirror some aspects of aging.
Yeah, things like changes in insulin sensitivity or potential shifts in the endocrine system.
But it's complicated, right? The stress of launch and re-entry plays a role too.
Definitely. It's hard to perfectly isolate the effect of just microgravity, but researchers are working on it. And they've also found that cognitive function can be affected, especially in the first few days in space.
Like what?
Things like spatial orientation, recognizing objects. It suggests there's a significant adaptation period the brain goes through, too.
So the body and the brain are both making huge adjustments. Okay, let's zoom out now. We've talked about the astronauts, their journey, the physical toll. What about the wider impact, the societal benefits of all this?
Right, because it extends way beyond the individuals who go up. That NASA document, Benefits Stemming from Space Exploration, makes a really strong case. It argues that, over 50 years of humans in space has genuinely produced major societal benefits, improved quality of life down here.
And some of the earliest examples are things we almost take for granted now, right? Like satellites.
Exactly. Those first satellites provided the basic knowledge needed for satellite TV and communications, for GPS.
Can't imagine life without GPS.
Tell me about it. And huge advances in weather forecasting, too. Predicting storms, saving lives. That all has roots in early space tech. It's woven into our modern world now.
And it's also spurred economic activity.
Yeah, quite a bit. Investment in space has led to real economic returns, new industries, innovation. Plus, just the sheer difficulty of space exploration forces us to create new science, new tech. It deepens our understanding of the universe fundamentally.
And this isn't just theoretical knowledge. You mentioned practical benefits in things like materials.
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge one. Space travel demands materials that are incredibly strong, lightweight, resistant to extreme temperatures,
Okay.
and power generation, too. You need super efficient, reliable power sources in space. These innovations often find their way back to Earth into industries here, making products better, more efficient, more durable.
Now, this is where I thought it got really interesting. The NASA document actually draws a line between the Apollo moon program in the 60s and a later increase in technical education in the U.S.
Yeah, there's a figure 3 in the document that shows it visually. After Apollo started, you see this noticeable jump in PhDs awarded in physical sciences, engineering, math.
Wow. So it suggests the excitement, the achievement of Apollo literally inspired a generation to go into STEM fields.
That's the strong implication. It's a powerful example of that cultural and inspirational impact space exploration can have. It's
Yeah.
not just about the science. It's about capturing imaginations.
And it's not always just one nation doing it, right? Collaboration is key.
Very often, yes. Big missions require huge resources, diverse expertise.
Yeah.
International partnerships are common. The International Space Station is probably the best example.
Right, multiple countries working together.
Exactly. It shows nations can overcome political, economic friction to achieve these massive shared goals in space. There's real diplomatic value there, too.
And beyond inspiration and diplomacy, space exploration actually helps tackle concrete global problems.
It really does. Think about climate change. Satellites are absolutely essential for monitoring Earth's climate systems, understanding the changes,
Okay.
and predicting space weather like solar storms. These can damage satellites, power grids on Earth. Understanding them helps us prepare.
And even asteroid threats.
Yeah, identifying asteroids, understanding their orbits, developing potential ways to protect Earth. That Chelyabinsk meteor event back in 2013 was a pretty stark reminder that this is a real, if rare, threat. Space assets help us keep an eye out.
It's also interesting how private companies are getting more involved now.
Definitely. As the costs and risks of getting to space have come down, it's opened the door for private investment. We're seeing companies involved in transportation, building habitats, space tourism, even looking at asteroid mining.
Asteroid mining, wow, that sounds like science fiction.
Well, it's still early days, but people are seriously exploring the potential. This commercialization could unlock even more innovation and benefits down the road.
So if you boil it down, the fundamental benefits are really about pushing innovation, inspiring people culturally, and giving us new ways to handle global challenges.
That's a great summary. And it helps justify the significant investment these programs require.
And it's not stopping at the ISS, is it? There are plans for going further.
Oh yeah, there are ongoing international talks, roadmaps like the ISECG Global Exploration Roadmap. They're looking beyond low Earth orbit,
Like where?
back to the moon with crewed missions, and eventually onto Mars. Building on everything learned from the ISS, combining human and robotic exploration, big goals ahead.
Now, just briefly, before we wrap up, we mentioned the economic context. There was some recent news about stock market drops, the dollar falling, tied to comments about the Federal Reserve and trade tensions.
Right. And while that's not directly about astronauts, it's part of the larger environment. Economic uncertainty, political influence on monetary policy, trade disputes. These things affect investor confidence, market stability.
So things like tariffs are a concern for companies, for the wider economy.
Yeah. According to the sources, there are definitely concerns about tariffs impacting businesses and the overall economic picture. Things like the independence of the Fed are generally seen as important for stable policy.
So it's just a reminder that even these grand space exploration efforts happen within this complex web of earthly economic and political forces.
Exactly. It's all interconnected. Funding for big science projects like space exploration often depends on a stable economic outlook.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive. We've gone from the intense astronaut selection process through the surprising ways space tech benefits us to the very real physical toll, and even touched on that wider context, all centered on these remarkable individuals.
And hopefully for everyone listening, you now have maybe a richer, more nuanced view of it all. That was the goal, right?
Yeah.
A shortcut to getting informed on these really captivating areas.
Absolutely. So as we kind of reflect on these incredible feats of exploration alongside the complexities here on Earth, it leaves me with a final thought. How might that spirit of pushing boundaries, that relentless search for knowledge we see in space exploration, how might that inspire new ways to tackle our challenges right here? Especially thinking about the perspectives astronauts bring back after seeing Earth from afar.
That's a great question to ponder. What new insights do they gain?
Exactly. Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.